I got to leave 12 minutes.
What are they? Seems like the same shit, and then there's like a picture of that guy. Yeah, like, it was so annoying.
I.O.
This man, I'm gonna be like, it was like,
Cameron was one of our classes.
I've actually
What's going on with that? Are our teeth done?
She said we should have it done, like, she's not. But I mean,
What's going on now? Eliminate that.
I think it's pretty open in the
No, you're just on the iPad.
Okay, just a reminder, on Friday, there will be a lecture at 10 o'clock in the morning up in the anatomy seminar room where we used to meet in the beginning. This room is booked out in the morning since we flipped with your other course. And then there's no class on Monday because I believe you have an exam. Does anyone plan on going in? How long's your exam in the morning?
2 hours.
Anybody want to come in on Monday afternoon?
Right.
Don't all speak at once. Just have a review, just to hang out, just say, remind yourself what the exam's like a week later. You know, all that stuff. Well, we'll wander down and see if anybody thinks only appropriate. Okay, today's lecture, and then next Wednesday there's a review, and then next Friday there's a review, and then there's an exam, which you'll all do exceptionally well on, I'm sure. I hope. Okay, today we're talking about the larynx, or voice box, thing we use for talking, among other things. Okay, this is sort of what it looks like, and we're going to go over this in excruciating detail, but there's a lot of slides, but shall we say limited content. Okay, so we're going to start with an overview. What is the larynx? What does it do? The bones and cartilages involved, the spaces and folds, that's particularly what you need to make sure you know. Lots of muscles, many of which you've seen before, some of which will be new today. What the larynx does and how it works, its innervation, vasculature, and some sort of differences within our population. Okay, overview. Okay, so the larynx, you know, it's what's known as the voice box, this thing you can see down here. This is what is colloquially known as the Adam's apple, that bulge in the middle of your throat. And it includes bones, our old friend the hyoid bone, several cartilages, a variety of muscles, ligaments, and lots of membranes. What does it do? Well, one big part, as you recall from all the slides we showed of the pharynx and the soft palate, obviously things go in, air goes into your mouth, air goes into your nose, food goes into your mouth. You want food to go from your mouth into your esophagus. You don't want it to go up into your nose, and that's what the soft palate's there for, to make sure it doesn't go into the nasal cavity. And likewise, you don't want the food to end up in your lungs, And that's what one of the functions of the larynx and the epiglottis in particular is, to make sure that when you swallow, the food goes down the esophagus. When you breathe, the air goes down the trachea. It obviously, because, well, you'll see, because the air going in and out of the trachea and the lungs passes through here, it can control the volume of air going in. You can use it to cut off the air coming in or going out, or open the passageway wider so that you can get a lot more air into your lungs than you might otherwise do. And also, particularly, it's important in speech. It's what gives you a high voice or a low voice or somewhere in between, or all sorts of fancy ways of singing. Okay, where is it? I think you've all seen it by now, because when we dissected the neck, you found it, this thing up front. Okay, it's in the visceral compartment of the neck. Right, it's between the oropharynx above and the trachea below. It's anterior to part of the pharynx, between about C3 and C6, and it's behind the thyroid gland. So when you opened up the neck and you saw these thyroid glands, the larynx was basically behind them. Okay, so here it is again. Okay, that's the area, and we're considering the larynx, everything from the hyoid down to the bottom of the cricoid cartilage. Here it is with the pharynx opened up from the posterior view. Okay, so there's a little space out here on the side, which are known as the piriform recesses. Okay, this is showing you the cartilaginous skeleton and also the hyoid bone that's normally covered by various membranes, but these are the parts we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. Okay, so let's go over the structure, the harder structures of the larynx. Okay, so what do we have here? All sorts of things, many of which you've seen at one level or other before. So here's our friend the hyoid bone, right, with the body and the greater horn and the lesser horn. Connecting the hyoid bone with the thyroid cartilage is the thyrohyoid membrane. Okay, so this is a membranous structure. And then there's an area in the front that's referred to as the median ligament. So this is your thyroid cartilage. Down here is another cartilage, the cricoid cartilage. You can see from here, and you'll see better in later slides, that it's often described as looking like a signet ring, your high school or college ring, sort of thin in front, but in the back it's got this big sort of square surface. Okay, connecting the cricoid cartilage and the thyroid cartilage anteriorly is this ligament, the cricothyroid ligament, and there are also muscles that overlie that ligament and the cricoid cartilage on the side, a little bit in the front. And then below the cricoid cartilage is another series of cartilaginous structures, the rings of the trachea. Okay, so here's a more oblique views. Again, there's the hyoid bone, the thyrohyoid membrane, thyroid cartilage, cricothyroid muscle, cricothyroid ligament, the cricoid cartilage. You can see it's thin in front and becomes larger in the back, and then the cartilaginous rings of the trachea. Close up, again reviewing the hyoid with a body, this large area up front, a long greater horn extending to the back, and these little short horns, the lesser horns, coming off the sides of the body. Whoa. Okay, so another view, again, much of the same stuff. So the thyroid cartilage, like the hyoid, also has horns, right? You can see this part that's starting to work its way up towards the greater horn of the hyoid, the superior horn of the thyroid. And then it has this lamina, this big flat area here, one on each side, a superior thyroid notch, so that these lamina are fairly tall, and then there's a gap in between. There's a line separating these broad lamina on the front from the posterior area, known as the oblique line. And then at the bottom of the thyroid, again, it has this prominence extending inferiorly, known as the inferior horn. Okay, below the thyroid, between the trachea and the thyroid, is the cricoid cartilage. And as I've said before, it's got a fairly narrow arch up front and a big broad lamina in the back. And there's another oblique view. Okay, the other big cartilaginous part is this sort of thing that looks like a tongue, okay, called the epiglottic cartilage, which essentially forms the structure of the epiglottis, and it has sort of a stalk, this sort of narrow area down there where it's attached to the thyroid cartilage inferiorly. And sitting on top of the cricoid cartilage are these little sort of pyramid-shaped structures known as the arytenoid cartilage. So there's one on the right and one on the left, okay, and they have a little pointy part at the top, and a big prominence out here and a prominence out there, and we'll talk about what attaches to those. So here's another view. So this upper part is known as the apex, and there's another little cartilage that sits on top of that apex, known as the craniculate cartilage, which you don't really have to worry about because it's in light print. Then there's a part that's sort of pointing anteriorly, okay, and that's known as the vocal process. Okay, and essentially the vocal ligaments are going to attach to that. So that's very important. And then out on the side is another process, and that's the muscular process. And I think you can imagine that muscles are going to attach to that. And as these muscles move the arytenoid cartilage one way or the other, they can stretch or relax the vocal cords that are in front of that, in the middle of the larynx. Okay, another view of these things. Again, on the sides you have the muscular processes. Towards the midline and anterior we have the vocal processes, and then up top we have the apex, these taller areas. And down below is where they articulate and sit on top of the cricoid cartilage, the back surface of the cricoid cartilage. Okay, because they sit on top of the cricoid cartilage, there is actually a joint there known as the cricoarytenoid joint. Okay, and this allows the arytenoid cartilage to move in various directions relative to the cricoid cartilage and also relative to one another. So they can sort of become more close together, they can separate apart, they can sort of slide posteriorly or towards each other as well as rotating. There is also, remember this inferior horn of the thyroid cartilage, okay, it articulates with the cricoid cartilage, and that's the cricothyroid joint, and it basically allows the thyroid cartilage to tilt anteriorly and posteriorly relative to the cricoid, so it can sort of tilt forward. And you can see when the thyroid cartilage tilts forward, it's going to stretch these vocal cords here. When it tilts back, they're going to become shorter and looser. Okay, so we've gone over this once before, but once again, there are obviously a variety of ligaments, connective tissues joining these various structures, which are generally referred to as ligaments or membranes. So the big one up here is the thyrohyoid membrane. Okay, the thickened part between this notch in the thyroid and the body of the hyoid is often referred to as the median thyrohyoid ligament, because it's a little thicker than this thinner membrane out here. And then down here, again, on the midline between the cricoid and the inferior surface of the lamina of the hyoid, of the thyroid, is the cricothyroid ligament. And the real business part of these things, extending from the vocal processes of the arytenoid cartilage into the front of the thyroid cartilage is the vocal ligament. And that, as I said, that as these things rotate, that can be stretched or loosened. Okay, so, and then there's our epiglottic cartilage sitting up on top. So here's sort of the vocal region. This is where you control breathing, control sound, control various aspects of your voice. Okay, so air's coming up here. The mouth and the pharynx are up here. The trachea is down below that cricoid cartilage there. So air passes through this gap here. Okay. The ligaments running from the vocal process of the arytenoid cartilages to the inner surface of the thyroid cartilage, okay, is referred to as the vocal ligament. Okay. This structure to the side, going from the inside of the thyroid to this vocal ligament, is referred to as the conus elasticus. The whole area here is referred to as the glottis. Okay. So the gap in here between the right and left vocal ligaments is referred to as the rima glottis, the rim of this whole thing, which is the glottis. And this, like I say, this vocal ligament runs from the interior surface of the thyroid cartilage back to the vocal process. So these arytenoids, and then these little muscles attach here, and they can rotate the arytenoids and stretch this or make it